Rav Lichtenstein says that if you're going to go with the kesher, you should go with the kesher of the Rambam, because he had a Masorah for the kesher. And he thought that the Raavad was the correct.
So let's start, guys. Let's start, even though we have some more people coming on the way. I think everything here is perfect. Yes. So I'm behind the camera, but everyone, welcome to our house again. All you guys, well, you all know me, Baruch Hashem. Thank you for coming this evening. So I was telling Rav Doron on the way back now, I just took the road from Edgeware, that we have started a custom in Bnei Akiva UK, that when special Gedolim come to London, Bnei Akiva UK is a must station stop for them to come and share some Torah with us. I mentioned some of the names of the one that have already come over the last few years, especially the last few months. We had some great names here. We're on YouTube, so I can't really say, but Bezrat Hashem, I hope Rav Shechter is going to be here in a few weeks. Cross your fingers. Bezrat Hashem. Keep your notifications on the updates group active. But we have today the zchut of having Rav Doron Podlashuk with us here from Eretz Israel. Rav Doron is very close to Avi Anai. He was the director of Manhigut Toranit program, where we studied 5 years in Kolel Eretz Chemda. So in some way, Rav Doron was our boss for 5 years. And Rav Doron is a big Talmid Chacham. Spent 10 years in Yeshivat Har Etzion, Yeshivat HaGush, with Smicha, then Shlichut as a Rosh Kollel in South Africa, and then came back to establish the program of Manhigut Toranit, sending out Shlichim to all around the world. And Rav Doron is basically the mindset, the mind behind the Tzurba M'Rabanan English series, and the main editor, right? Main translator, editor. He's the person who runs it, and
I just make sure it gets written.
Yeah. that's translating and editing and making sure that it gets written. It's the same thing. But Rav Doron is a very, very serious Talmid Chacham. On the 7th of October, Rav Doron went to Miluim for a few months. And the only reason he was exempt from Miluim was because Rav Doron donated the kidney. And the IDF said, if you only have one kidney, you can't be a lochem in Miluim of Golani. So Rav Doron is a very special person. And we have the honor of him being here in London today with us and sharing with us some Torah connected to all of our ideology and especially also the time we're living in. So Rav Doron, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Yeshar Koach. Thank you, Rav Avichai, Avia. Pleasure to be with you. Let's share some words of Torah, some questions, shilas, stories from the front lines. So I have to say, I wasn't on the front lines. So what am I going to share with you? So on the 7th of October, like half of Israel, I was in a mamad. But on the 8th of October, when I went back to the Kollel in Yerushalayim, all of a sudden I discovered that the entire Kollel being called up, and I was left with an empty Beit Midrash. And I was didn't know what to do with myself. So I called up my old office. I said, listen, I'm over the age, but if you need soldiers, then I'm here. And they said, no, we don't need you. And then like a week later, he said, report to the base at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So I said, fine. For how long? Should I pack for like a week, 2 weeks, And he said, yeah, I'll come for 2 weeks. So 5.5 months later, I hung up my uniform. But they saw my age. I said, listen, you're not going to Gaza. So they put me in Judea and Samaria. However, as I said, this group of Avrechim, they were in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and often they didn't have their phones. But when they did have their phones, all of them are rabbis, so they became the de facto go-to person with questions and shilas. So we had like the Beit Midrash became a virtual Beit Midrash. We had a WhatsApp group. We have a WhatsApp group, and everyone's asking shilas and giving their svaras why they think it's mutar or asur. So a lot of the stories, questions that I'm going to speak about are not that I personally had. Some of them are from my personal, but really from a group of these rabbinic students. Many of them are chaverim of Rav Avichai. Okay, so to begin, let me tell you that I think it was 3 months ago. I was in a rabbinic conference and I met in Mexico, and I met a colleague of mine. He's a Dayan. And he told me the following story. He said that there was a soldier, and on the 7th of October, he went down to the south. He was fighting, and for a few weeks he was in Gaza. And they came out, and beginning of the war, the soldiers basically had 24 hours, but they came to like Be'eri, the kibbutz Be'eri became an army base. And the kibbutz, the soldiers were allowed to go there for 24 hours, shower, running water, take off their boots, sleep properly, eat properly, and then they would go back into Gaza. But they weren't allowed out of the kibbutz. He says to his officer, he says, I need to go to the chief rabbinate of the army. You need to let me out of the kibbutz. Officer said, no one's going out of the kibbutz. Every parent, I'm getting calls from all the parents. He said, well, what's the urgency? Why do you need to go to the chief rabbinate? Said, I need to finish my conversion. This was a soldier who grew up in Israel, speaks fluent Hebrew better than any of us, and his father was Jewish, but his mother wasn't. And he realized that he wasn't Jewish, and he started converting, and then the war broke out. So he says, I want to finish my conversion. The officer let him out for 12 hours. He paid for the taxi. The officer paid for the taxi to send him to the chief rabbinate. Now, I'm hearing it from the Dayan side. The Dayan said they get a call, scrambling all the Dayanim, that they have to make a beit-in. Urgent, with this chayal coming out of Gaza. Anyway, so they're sitting in front of the chayal. They asked two questions. They said, first of all, how are you keeping mitzvahs? Tell us where you're holding. Second of all, what's the rush? What's going on? So he said, look, in terms of mitzvahs, I'll be honest. I'm not putting on tefillin every day. I'm not doing this. But I'm with religious soldiers. It's very confusing. Like, I don't know what's pikuach nefesh, what's not pikuach nefesh. But whatever the religious soldiers do, I follow their lead. So when they put on tefillin, I put on tefillin. When they daven, I daven. When they don't, then obviously we're not meant to be davening at this time. So that's where I'm holding. In terms of what's the rash? He said, look, I've got a lot of friends who didn't come out. And I'm going back in 24 hours. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be coming out alive. And if I'm not, I want to be buried a Ben Avraham Avinu. I want to die as a Jew. I want to die as a Ben Avraham Avinu. And I think that on a certain level, that encapsulates what so many of the Chayalim are feeling. What does it mean to be a Ben Avraham Avinu? We always think Avraham Avinu is the paragon of Chesed, which is true. Avraham Avinu is also the first Jewish warrior. Now, in the world, BBC world and Sky world, if you're a soldier, you think, this Navy SEAL, whatever it is, you're not a tzaddik, or, they just don't go together. You're not this idol thing. But in the Jewish world, in our world, Avraham Avinu says there's no contradiction. You can be a tzaddik, you can be a paragon of chesed, and you can fight for justice and what's right. And that's what he did. He was the first Jewish warrior who fought for what? For hostages. To free hostages, his lot, right? So that's what our Chayalim are doing. There's justice and there's chesed, and they go hand in hand, and there's no contradiction. And that is our message to the world. And it's going to take them another 20 years to figure it out, or however long it is. But that's the truth. That is our truth. And we must never get rid of all the noise, because that is the truth. We're fighting for justice. We're fighting for light. We're fighting for goodness. And they tzaddikim that are doing it. Okay. I want to take you back to 7th of October. So again, on the 9th of October, I get a call from my brother. My brother has, he's got 9 kids. 7 of them are girls, and 4 of the girls are married. The 2 younger ones are the boys, right? So the 4 older girls are married, and I get a call from him. He said, "Look," and they live up north. He says, "Can my niece Noam, can she come stay at us? Come stay at us? Sure. What's going on?" So he said, Neria, on the 7th of October, heard that there was a balagan. They live in the Moshav Hazurim next to the Kinneret. Heard there was a balagan. Drove down to the Otef, Aza, and was fighting for 30 hours. And sometime on the 8th of October, he got shot in one of the kibbutzim, and he was airlifted to Beilinson Hospital. And so obviously we're the closest, as opposed to being in the north, we're the closest. So of course, so Noam comes to stay with him. Then 6 weeks later, fast forward 6 weeks later, the same Noam calls me up, my niece, says, "Dodi, can I come for Shabbos?" Of course. What's the story? Neria, 6 weeks later, was back in Gaza. He's a tank officer. So although he was shot in the foot, he in the beginning of the war, he said, I'm getting out of the hospital, and he went straight back into Gaza. 6 weeks later, because he was a tank officer, so the fact that he was shot in the foot didn't stop him, and he was able to fight there. But he was getting out for 24 hours. But when was he getting out? 10 o'clock on Friday morning, and he had to be back 10 o'clock on Shabbos morning. So this is the question, can he come? Now, on the 7th of October, it was Shabbos, he drove down, no questions asked, Pikuach Nefesh, right? So here, what's the problem? Pikuach Nefesh, there's a war going on, but it's different. Because if it's Pikuach Nefesh, so just say it, don't leave the base, right? We live 40 kilometers from Gaza. So why does he have to Friday morning come and knowing that on Shabbos morning he's going to have to go back, right? Everyone hear the question. So there was a question. Can he come? Can he not? By the way, this wasn't a question only of Neria. This was probably the most common question that was asked in the first 3 months of the war. Soldiers didn't know what to do. Can they leave knowing that they have to drive back on Shabbos? Because every miluimnik, right, was getting 24 hours. So it happened to be that 1/7 of all the miluimnikim were actually getting this this shiur happened to them because they had to come back on Shabbat. Now the truth is, it's not a new question. The Gemara in Shabbat Yutet says that a person is not allowed to get on a boat Erev 3 days before Shabbat. Why are you not allowed to get on a boat 3 days before Shabbat? What's the connection? So the truth is, the Gemara doesn't give an answer, doesn't give a reason why it's a problem. Just gives the quotes the Mishnah and the Braita. There are at least 7 different answers by the Rishonim, but one of the answers is based on the Baal HaMaor. The Baal HaMaor says the following idea. The Baal HaMaor says that the reason why you're not allowed to get on a boat 3 days before Shabbat is because 2,000 years ago there was a good chance that you would have to be Mechalel Shabbos on Shabbat. When 2,000 years ago, when the captain said all hands on deck, it wasn't like the guests stayed in their luxury cabins. All hands on deck, meaning everyone get busy, tie knots, whatever you needed to do. That was the reality. So says the Baal HaMaor, what was the Mishnah telling us? Chazal was saying that 3 days before Shabbat, you're not allowed to put yourself in a situation that on Shabbat it will be pikuach nefesh and you'll have to be mechalel Shabbos. That's quite a wild chiddush. That meaning before 3 days, you can put yourself in a situation knowing that come Shabbat, you'll have to be mechalel Shabbos. So according to that logic, Neria, it's now Friday, right? So just as you're not allowed to get on a boat Erev Shabbos if you know you're going to have to be Mechalel Shabbos, so too he shouldn't have been able to come to stay at us knowing that he have to be Mechalel Shabbos. The Gemara gives one exception to the rule. What's the exception to the rule? The Tzorech Mitzvah. The Tzorech Mitzvah, it's mutar to get on a boat even Erev Shabbos. So here there's a question. What's the Tzorech Mitzvah here? So many people, the Tzorech Mitzvah, they're going home to their parents. Parents they're wishing their children goodbye. They send them off on the bus. They don't know if they're coming back. Rav Moshe Feinstein held that it was a mitzvah for kids to write home when people still wrote letters, right? There were mitzvahs to write home to their parents every Erev Shabbos when they were in yeshiva. Why? Because of Kibbud Avein. So here, a kid going home, L'tzorech mitzvah, right? That's Kibbud Avein on steroids, right? So that could be a good reason. And for Neria to come to his wife. So lichora, that's a tzorech mitzvah. So that is a tzorech mitzvah. The chief rabbinate gave a different answer. The chief rabbinate said there's another reason why you can be makel. Because the soldiers need, for their mental health, they need to be rejuvenated. So that was the answer. Okay. I want to take you, now we're leaving Gaza. I want to take you we're now in the hills of Yerushalayim, the hills of Judea. I'm on a hilltop with 6 chayalim. Me and 5 other chayalim. We're on this hilltop. We're sitting. We're looking over an Arab village called Abadia. It's very close to Ma'ale Adumim, actually, and we're literally on this hilltop, and it's Erev Shabbos, and so I'm like trying to figure out that Eruv, there's no Eruv. We're a hilltop. There's no fence. There's nothing. Where can I walk around or whatever? Making sure that there's plata and everything. Okay, so I tell the guys, also I was like double the age of half the guys there. I said, guys, Friday night we'll like all eat together and make it a bit Labor Day. So the one guy, his name was Doron, like me. So the one guy, Doron, says, leave me out of this. I'm going to be on my cell phone. I don't want to eat with, whatever. Leave me out. I'm not doing this Friday night business. Okay, so I said Kiddush and whatever. Shabbos morning, again, I said, guys, let's have a Kiddush, whatever. They all came together. This time, the other Doron came. So I'm about to say Kiddush. And then I think, hold on a second. He didn't hear Kiddush on Friday night. So I flipped the siddur and I said Kiddush on Friday night on Shabbos morning. And the guys said, what kind of rabbi are you? You don't even know which Kiddush to say. You said the Kiddush on Friday night on Shabbos morning. What is that? But the truth is, why did I do that? How many brachas do you say on Friday night in Kiddush? 2. Mekadesh Shabbat and Borei Pri Hagafen. How many brachas do you say on Kiddush on Shabbos morning? Borei Pri Agafen. The truth is, you don't even, we say B'Shamru, we say a few psukim. Me'ikra din, Savri Baruch Borei Pri Agafen, Yotze. The Shulchan Aruch in Reish Ayin Aleph, Sifchet says that a person who missed Kiddush on Friday night, which is the bracha of Lekadesh et Hashamat, Yesh lo tashlumin. Even if he missed b'meizid, even if he missed intentionally, and this guy missed Kiddush intentionally, Yesh tashlumin. So I was thinking, he hadn't heard Kiddush on Friday night, which is the Kiddush D'oraita Lichora. So that's why I said it. But the question is, I heard Kiddush. He didn't hear Kiddush. So why could I say it again? I couldn't give it to him. He wouldn't have said Kiddush. But I said it so he could hear. So how does that work? The fact that he hasn't heard Kiddush explains the Ritva. What does it mean? The fact that he hasn't heard Kiddush means on a certain level, I haven't fulfilled my mitzvah. Right?
His shiur is greater than yours.
His shiur is greater than mine. Correct. So his shiur is greater than mine because I've already fulfilled it. However, that is only if there's a difference between if I didn't have a shiur lechatchila. So let's say I had a shiur on a rabbinic level and he has a shiur on a Torah level. Then it's a problem for me to be motzi him. But here, it's not that I had a shiur d'oraita, just like he had a shiur d'oraita. It's just that I've been yotzei. So if you have a shiur d'oraita, the same level of shiur, you've just been yotzei, you can still fulfill the mitzvah of because of arei.
What's the whole tshuva with women if they have a high level shiur because you've already been yotzei and tshuva?
Yafeh. You're going with the Not of Yehuda and his and everyone argues on him.
The whole thing with Rav Moshe finds
Yes.
the Shabbos.
Yes. Rabbi Akiva. Yes. I don't know. Rav Moshe Fassi might also say, but it's based on Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says if you say good Shabbos, then you also be yotzei zeh. Yafeh. Tov. Kol hakavod. You've got Talmidei Chachamim around the table. Yafeh. But the point is that lichora, if you have, by the way, everyone that question of the Not of Yehuda, many people argue with him based on what we say. But okay, so he didn't write it in his shut Not of Yehuda. He wrote it on the Shulchan Aruch. No, not in the Slach. He wrote it in his notes on the Shulchan Aruch. Anyway, as far as I know, I don't remember. Okay, maybe he wrote in both. Maybe the Gul Mervava. He wrote in the Gul Mervava. Anyway, so let me tell you a story of the Sarevas. Okay, I had with one of these 6 soldiers. I was on different places. So I was on this hilltop for a month and a half, and then in different places. So one of this hilltop. There were one of the soldiers there was a guy named Dror. Dror was from Ramat Gan. He grew up in Ramat Gan. He was in Golani. After he was in Golani, he left Israel. Not only did he leave Israel, he closed his bank account. The only reason I know he closed his bank account because when the army wanted to pay him, they didn't know how to pay him because he didn't have a bank account. The army can only pay you if you've got a bank account in Israel. So we're thinking maybe he can give our bank account. It was a balagan. He's living in Budapest with his non-Jewish girlfriend / partner / wife for the last 4 years from Sarajevo. Comes the 7th of October, and Dror finds himself, he was with us for 2.5 months, left Budapest, and he's with us for 2.5 months. So I'm doing Shmirah with Dror. I said, Dror, I said it a bit more tactfully, but I said, listen, Dror, you just got to explain this to me. Something's not adding up. And I didn't say to him like this, but you understand why. I said it a bit more tactfully, but I said, listen, you're not connected to Torah in any shape or form. He was completely Chiloni with tattoos all over. Yeah. You're not connected to Eretz Yisrael. You've closed your bank account. You've left to Budapest. You're not connected to Am Yisrael. You're going out with a non-Jewish girl. I mean, like you've kind of closed shop. What are you doing here? Like, just explain it to me. And Dror said to me, I don't know. I actually don't know, but it just felt wrong to stay in Budapest. I had to come. And he didn't have an answer. But I think the answer is Kol Yisrael Arevin Zeh B'Zeh. it's not just on a mitzvah level. It's on a very deep. There's a deep connection. There's such a deep connection that when you scratch the surface, and we're seeing this. If you don't listen to the news, but if you scratch the surface, you're seeing that Am Yisrael is coming together. I want to take you to Gaza March of 2024, right? March of 2024. My other nephew, his name is Aryeh Tam. So Aryeh Tam was in a commander unit in the Gaza. He was in a room in Gaza, in Khan Yunis, and they were in a room, 18 soldiers, and they shot an RPG into the room. So 2 of the soldiers were killed, and his entire unit were injured. He was in hospital for 6 months, in rehab for 6 months. Pretty much, fast forward a few months later, he has a bris for his son, first son. He got married a year and a half ago to my niece. Spent 6 months in hospital. Since 3 months in Gaza, 6 months in hospital, and a few months later, we were at the bris, and it was very heart-wrenching because his whole unit came. Now I remember the unit at the wedding. At the wedding, you had all these guys, Chilonim, Datim, like commando guys, all dancing like they were the life of the party on the dance floor, all with their guns, and it was amazing. And at the bris, it was very difficult. You have people in wheelchairs, missing limbs, etc. Some of them would still have the bracelets because they came from the army, from the hospital to the bris, and then they're going back to the hospital, meaning they're in months and months and months in rehab. The sandik of the bris, I said, I don't recognize him. I mean, I know I know my family, our side, and I thought I'd met all of his family on his side, but obviously I didn't, because I didn't recognize who was the sandik. It was the father of one of the chayalim who was killed. So I remember what he said at his bris. He said, look, he quoted a Zohar. The Zohar has a very special place called the Heichal de Mashiach, the oil, the tent of the Mashiach. And at the entrance to the tent of the Mashiach, there's a big sign. And the sign says, Kol man de lo yada. Anyone who doesn't know, Lamahavcha bein meriruta lemetuka, to be able to change sweetness to bitterness, chashucha leura, and darkness to lighter, lo ya'al kan, has no place in the oil of Mashiach. Meaning the oil of Mashiach, you have to have the ability to see the bitterness, but also see the sweetness, to see the darkness, and to see the sweetness. He said, to say everything fine, things are not fine. He said, look at us, things aren't fine. But then he said, but we all shouldn't have survived. It's like a miracle. They shot an RPG into the room, and basically 16 of them survived. And he's now celebrating with the bris of his son. So you also have to be able to see the sweetness in the bitterness. And that is, we're living in Dor Shel Mashiach, is the ability. Our job is, things aren't fine. There are so many almanot and young women, etc., besides the psuim and the parents shikulim and the hostages. It's what people are going through. However, we also have to recognize the nisim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for us. We're about to celebrate Pesach. The Gemara says, Chachamim tiknu arba kosot. Why did they be metakin arba kosot? Rashi says, Keneged arba lashonot shel geula. What are the arba lashonot shel geula? Referring to Votzeiti v'yitzalti v'alti v'lakachti of Yetziat Mitzrayim. But the Yerushalmi says, no. That's only one opinion. That's the opinion of a Dat Yachid in the Yerushalmi. Chachamim argue, and Chachamim say, no. It's connected to the Arba Leshonot, of course, of Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu and David HaMelech la'atid lavo. And what is the point? What is the difference? The difference is, are we just celebrating the Geulah of Yetziat Mitzrayim? According to the Yerushalmi, no, Chachamim instituted the Arba Kosot keneged the Geulah of Mitzrayim and also to keneged the Geulah la'atid lavo. The Midrash Rabbah in Shira, the Midrash of Shira Shirim says, Domeh dodi letzvi, that our Domeh dodi letzvi, like Mashiach is, or it depends how you understand the Midrash. Mashiach, lichora, it's referring to Mashiach is similar to a deer. Just as the Gemara says, what's the deer? The deer in Shira Shirim appears and disappears. Appears and disappears. Like, you see it a moment and it disappears. The Midrash says, just as Hagoel Harishon, Moshe Rabbeinu, Nigle v'nichse. Moshe Rabbeinu appeared, and then he disappeared to Midian for decades. And then he appears, and we think it's all good. And what happens? Paro says, more work. Appears, disappears. The Geulah is coming, disappears. The Geulah is coming and disappears. Says the Midrash, just as Hagoel Harishon, nichse v'nigle, so too Hagoel Acharon, nichse v'nigle. Meaning, it's going to be a ping pong. And our job is to realize, to be able to see, it's easy to see the nichse, right, that Hashem's hiding. But you also have to see the nigle, that Hashem appears. And that is our job, to be able to see not only the darkness, but also the light, not only the bitterness, but also the sweetness. And there is miracles. And you just talk to so many. My brother, my nephew, Neria, we call him the guy with 9 lives because every time, he doesn't tell all the stories, but literally he should have, it's crazy. And I've got guys in our program, friends of Rav Avichai. They came back. We had a Sibat's Hodaya. After, unfortunately, some of them are going back now into Gaza, but we had a Masibat Hodaya, and each one got up and said, "Wow, like they shouldn't be there," and like it's a miracle that they were there, and like each story was crazier than the next. Okay, I want to end off with 2 more stories, if you've got time. Okay, I want to. Okay, yeah.
Average ending time is 12.
Okay. So I don't have that much to say, so don't worry. I want to go back to the 7th of October. A shaila that this is a story that Rav Slotsky told me. Rav Slotsky lost 2 of his sons. They were living in Beersheba. They heard that there was a balagan on the 7th of October. They put on the uniforms and they drove together to fight. I think it was next to Kibbutz Alumim, if I'm not mistaken. They fell and they lost track of them. The wives were calling them at like 10 o'clock in the morning. They weren't answering their calls. On the 8th of October, Rav Slotsky's eldest son decides to go and find his brothers. Now remember, 8th of October, there was still a proper balagan. It was like, Mechablim were popping out from everywhere. They had the GPS of one of the phones, so he drove to where the GPS of where the brother's phone was, because the wife, I don't know, they had these like family things, tracking system, and he found the phone. And unfortunately, he found 2 bodies, but they were so charred that he actually couldn't recognize if they were his brothers or not. But there was a ring and there was a watch. And he took a picture of the watch and he sent it to his wife, and she looked at the wedding album, and she said, "Yeah, it's the watch of your brother. It's a very similar watch." And then he was able to get the ring, and the ring of one of his brother's wife, grandfather is some type of goldsmith, and the grandfather gave some signature on the ring. And it was that signature. So lichora, these two women, very young women, up until that point were agunot. They didn't know where their husbands were. But now that we've got a siman, so maybe they're not an aguna, they're an almana. The question is, does that work halachically? There's a Gemara, the Gemara discusses simanim doraita de Rabbanan, and the Gemara uses the nafkamina regarding lahatir isha, lehinasei, right? Regarding giving a get back, etc. It's based on the question whether you hold simanim is a din doraita or the Rabbanan. Because if it's only the Rabbanan, so the fact that based on the sign I can give it back to you, maximum it's not yours. Baked in say hefker, baked in hefker, and we say okay, now it's yours. But if you say based on signs you're allowing a woman to get remarried, hold on a second, that's an issur doraita. You can't play around with hefker, baked in hefker. Rav Shlomo Kluger says we paskin that if it's a siman muvak, then it's okay. Now what's a siman muvak? Says Rav Shlomo Kluger, 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have a watch like this? If we had to, I would assume that like if we would go to get the 1,000 people around this neighborhood, not one of them would have a watch like this. If it was an Apple Watch, maybe, right? But like something slightly different, there's a good chance that it's more than 1 in 1,000 different. Definitely the ring. The ring is clearly more than 1 in 1,000. So it's a siman muvhak. Siman muvhak. What's the problem? Shulchan Aruch in Even HaEzer, siman Yud Zayin. It's the longest siman in the whole of the Shulchan Aruch. It goes on and on. This is all about agunot, etc., etc. But there it says, Shulchan Aruch Paskin said, it's true, siman muvhak is good. But that's only if the siman was on a person's body. Let's say a person had a birthmark or a scar on his neck. So that, how many people have a scar on their neck on the right-hand side? That's a siman muvhak, 1 in 1,000, yeah? But even though a ring is 1 in 1,000, a watch is 1 in 1,000, but it's clothing. And clothing, the concern is that maybe I lent it to my friend, or etc., etc. So you can't prove based on clothing, even though it's a siman muvak, that it's good enough to allow these women to be defined as an almana and not an aguna, and for the family to start mourning. So they waited a few days until they were able to match the DNA. So Baruch Hashem, they were able to match the DNA and everything was solved. Another question from the 7th of October, and this wasn't a question, this was a famous question. A woman from, I can't remember which kibbutz, I think it was Kibbutz Be'eri, her husband was killed and she was saved. And she was begging the army to find her, she knew that her husband was killed. I think she might have seen him killed or whatever it is. But she was begging the army to get his body out. Why? Because she wanted to, basically, she had one child with her husband, and she wanted another baby with her husband. Now, medically, it's possible to take from a dead person, right? Extract, basically, from the dead corpse within 24 hours, I don't know, I think within 72 hours of death, you basically are able to extract the sperm from the body, and basically that's what you wanted to do, IVF. Okay? Now, think about how many halachic questions. If this woman didn't have a child, okay, and she's a young woman, many young women basically lost their husbands, they can't remarry. They have to do yibum or chalitza. Now, if she had a child, then there's no yibum or chalitza. But if she doesn't have a child, then you do have to do yibum or chalitza. What happens if they do? So the first question is, can you do this IVF? Take from a deceased person and basically do IVF with the dead person's sperm to impregnate the woman. Is that mutar? Second of all, if it is mutar, if a woman is chayav in yibum and chalitza, and now she becomes pregnant, so is she no longer chayav in yibum and chalitza? You hear the question? So this is a question lichora that has never been asked in Jewish history, because it's not possible that a person dies and then the woman becomes pregnant. The Rambam paskins that if a husband dies and the woman is pregnant, we wait 9 months. She gives birth. We wait another 30 days. If the child survives, it's a bar kayama. She's patur from yibum and chalitza. If the child dies within the 30 days or was never like a living child, then she's chayav on yibum or chalitza. That's how the Rambam paskins. But that was a case where the woman was already pregnant when her husband died. Here, the woman wasn't even pregnant. 250 years ago, the Noda Yehuda says the following statement in his tshuva. He says, if a Navi would tell me that the woman at the time when her husband died was not pregnant, because remember, there's let's say they excuse me getting all graphic, but let's say a couple had relations. It could be that the woman only falls pregnant 72 hours later, meaning there's the act of having relations, but not necessarily does fertilization happen straight away. So says the Noda Yehuda, if a Navi would tell me that after that between relations and he died before the woman became fertilized, before she became pregnant, according to Noda Yehuda, the halacha would be as follows. The child would still have the yichus of the father, meaning if the father's a kohen, the child would be a kohen. The child would be able to inherit the father as a yoresh, but the woman would be chayav yibum and chalitza, yibum or chalitza. Because the pasuk says, the ben ein lo. At the time of the death, he didn't have a child and she wasn't pregnant. And says the Noda Yehuda, listen, we can't, no such, I'm not a Navi, so we have to assume that she was pregnant. But if I would know for certain that she wasn't pregnant, I would say she's still chayav in Yibum and Chalitza. Okay? However, the Keren Orah argues with him, but Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach paskins that Noda Yehuda. So this woman, what the Noda Yehuda paskin was a theoretical scenario, we have the ability to actually do that today, meaning the woman was definitely not pregnant. She has IVF after her husband died. According to the Noda Yehuda, she's still chayav in Yibum or Chalitza, even though she's pregnant. Pilei playing. And that's so this was a machloket between Rav Shlomo Rav Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, who said it was mutar to do the IVF, versus Rav Osher Weiss. Rav Osher Weiss is absolutely asked to do it. But assuming we pass in like Rav Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, and she did do it, the halacha would be that she's still chayav in Yibum or Chalitza, even though she's pregnant. So I'll just end off with one last thing. Going back to my slight fun days in Miluim. So I'm having this shmirah. The shmirot are 4-hour shifts, and again, it's me and my this way. I was actually doing shmirah with my mefaked Itai. Itai is a lawyer from Tel Aviv. So you can imagine we're coming from very, very different backgrounds. Itai, the lawyer from Tel Aviv, me, coming from the kollel, the rabbi, whatever, and we patrolling together, and we arguing everything under the sun, and not lo chaser dvarim to argue about, which was probably not the most clever thing to do because it got very heated, and we're both with loaded guns. but at the end of it, and I'll never forget this, the sun's coming up, and we're looking over this Arab village, and Itai says to me, he says, you know what, Doron? Chalas. He says, in the end of the day, if those mechablim come at us, I am moser nafshi bishvilcha. I'll give my life for you. And I'm 100% certain that you'll give me your life for me. However, אני לא רואה איך אנחנו יכולים לחיות ביחד. I can't see how we can live together. So that is the story of Klal Yisrael, that we know how to die together, but it's very we're struggling to be able to live together. But having said that, I think we should keep in mind what the Zohar says at the entrance to the Heichal of Mashiach. That the job of our job is not to complain about, there's so many balagan, whatever. The job is to be able to find those connections, to see the sweetness and the miracles and the achdut that there is there, and the arevut of Dror from Budapest, even though he's disconnected, right? And this guy Itai, who's a lawyer, who we argued about everything, and the reformer or the mapecha mishpatita, whoever wants to call it what. In the end of the day, we were both there, and he was able to be Moser. He was prepared to be Moser Nefesh. He actually left halfway because then he got shipped out to Gaza halfway. He became part of the unit that were doing finding traces for the from the hostages, whatever it is. But the point is, this is a guy who lichora has no connection to Yiddishkeit, no connection to anything, and he's willing to be Moser Nefesh. So we have to see that Bezrat Hashem, yesh tova, yesh gula, just like the gula in Mitzrayim wasn't chalak, it was nichse v'nigle. Our gula is nichse v'nigle. But at the end of the day, kima, we're marching towards the gula, and Bezrat Hashem, b'nisan nigalnu, b'nisan atid ligael. Thanks for listening. Okay.
Thank you, Rav Doron. I think maybe some Q&A. If anyone ask whatever you guys ask, whatever you want. I'm just going to say we're going to stop the live stream in a second because those of you who probably all know that Mizrahi UK are under investigation. The reason they are under investigation is because of Rav Doron. So we're gonna stop the live stream in a minute, and then we can go into Q&A. Ask whatever you guys want. I'm just going to stop it for 1 second.